Welcome to the Infinite Life podcast. I'm your host, Katische Haberfield. This podcast is a journey of discovery as we learn how the soul evolves over various incarnations to understand all about the complexities of being a human being who has to bravely navigate viewing life as a non-dualistic struggle between good and evil through consciousness-raising experiences that test our valor. Welcome to the Infinite Life podcast with Katische Haberfield. This week we have a very special bonus episode because we have a guest. Now, quite usually we'd have an actual case study with a client of mine, but this week we're going to be doing something different. I'm going to be the case study, so that's really exciting for me. And I've invited Indra Rinzler onto the podcast. Indra, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Indra has been on the spiritual path for 50 years, and he has an amazing website which goes into so many details of different things to do with understanding who you are in this lifetime. But for me, I wanted specifically to talk with Indra because he looks at Vedic astrology and location astrology to help you understand yourself better so that you can understand how where you live and where you travel to impacts your experience as a soul in this lifetime. So Indra is going to do a personalized location astrology reading for me today so that we can understand why I am the way I am and just find all about location astrology because I think it's a very fascinating topic. So with that, I will let Indra take over.
Okay, thank you so much. Wow. Yeah, this is the first. I've been on probably more than 80 podcasts, but I've done readings for podcast people, but not on the podcast. So that's a little bit, we've had to adjust here a little bit that I'm recording it at my end and changing it around and changing the focus, but I think we're going to have a really fun time. So the way I like to start is by saying that the reading is essence to essence, that we're going to talk about personality because that's where the problems are. But the reading isn't from or to the personality, that we want to let go of any judgments. There's no right or wrong. There's no shoulds or coulds. It's just what is, and we're looking at it from a very high level in order to be able to get clarity in how we want to move forward. But we're not talking, so we're talking about the places that are stuck, the personalities, that's what I call it. And maybe we have a little bit of nomenclature that I'll get into in a minute, differences, but the focus of the reading is essence to essence, from higher self to higher self. And we're going to talk about the lower self, but we're not talking from it or to it. And so I have asked you, as the reading, you have given me your birth information, time, date, and place. And I have sent you a number of charts in order to give you the information. And I've sent you a PowerPoint that we're going to go through a little bit. We're going to put them on the screen. And so I also sent you some questions that you answered, and we're going to read the answers to those questions and go through them later on. But before we start officially, what I like to do is I like to give people an opportunity while you've answered the questions. I'd like to give the people one more opportunity for them to say a little bit at the beginning. And the questions I normally ask in a reading, I've asked you location questions, but the general questions I ask in a reading are, and you don't have to answer any of them, but the questions are, why do you want the reading? How are you doing? What's up for you? And are there any questions that you want to have answered at the end of the reading? So if you've got something more you want to say about any of that before we start, this is the time.
Yeah, sure. So I guess for my listeners, they all know that I'm a mum of two teenage boys, and one of them is in the last year of high school next year, and the other one only has 3 years to go. So I'm about to finish that caregiving stage of my life. And my life has been characterized by a lot of travel when I was in high school and in university, internationally. Not much travel in my 20s. I did a lot of travel in Australia. And then whilst I've been a single mum, so post-marriage breakup, I haven't traveled anywhere for a very long time. So it was just when I was looking at your website, Indra, I thought, wow, isn't it fascinating how I have come back to my birth city, which I never thought I would do. And I have kind of a little bit, I've loved being here, but I've also felt stuck. I felt the city that I lived in has been perfect for rearing children and for being in a safe and wonderful city, but I don't feel like it is where I'm meant to be long term. So my question was, okay, if I'm speaking to somebody who knows all about this sort of thing, tell me about how where I live could impact the experience that I have of life. Because if I'm going to be child-free in, say, 5 years, and I can make up the rest of my life, because we can make our life with every decision we make. Nobody said you have to live in the same city that you're born and potentially dying. You can be anywhere. Let's forget about visas and things like that and logistics. I know you, Indra, seem to live in 2 different locations during the year, in America and in India, is it?
Yes, I traveled for 20 years. I haven't traveled since COVID, and I'm about to go to India in a month for 4 months. But yes, for 20 years I traveled Asia in the winter and for 10 years in the summer and all over the world. I was an importer. I was a trader.
Yeah.
I
so
bought
I think that's fascinating.
trinkets to sell.
Yeah, perfect. And so I guess I'm looking forward and saying, I work with, all I need is a laptop and an internet connection to work. And I could be based anywhere in the world. Let me learn more about what my soul desires and what's good for me in the field of travel, and the field of understanding how where you live in the world actually does impact your experience. If you can create and be anything that you want and live anywhere that you want, let's learn a little bit more about that.
Okay, well, that's great. And if you have other questions, we can go into it more. And so I have that. And the first part that we want to do is we're going to look at your chart. But before we do that, I wanted to, what you wrote me, the first 2 paragraphs general, and I thought that I would bring this in and then go from there. So this is what you wrote me. To be perfectly clear, I'm not looking to relocate anywhere at the moment, and that's fine. I'm interested in the fact and understand the concept that where you live actually experiences your soul satisfaction in its incarnation. I don't think it's so much soul. I think that's more personality. It's the personality that's reacting to I like and I don't like. I don't think the soul really cares where it is. And maybe there's a difference in nomenclature, but okay. So it's about personality. It's about the personality. It's about, you get to a place, been hearing this a bit lately, and it's dirty there, and it's not free, and it's not democratic. I don't like it. Why is that? It's because your personality is not free within itself. And when you're free within yourself, then you can be anywhere. People woke up in the concentration camps. Corrie ten Boom was a wonderful book, enlightened woman, and Anne Frank. The stories, it wasn't about having freedom, it was about their personal work. And so the place can help, but we're dealing with personalities. Okay. Is that clear? Okay. So I think that many people are born in one city and die in the same city. Absolutely true. Some people travel widely in between those two markers, but ultimately on the record were born and died in the same place. There are a lot of travelers. And I think that part of it Well, it fascinates me that some people are restless in Rome and others are not. But it's a part of your life. And I'm going to tell you why. You were in your Mars period when you were traveling university and such, and then you moved in and you were at the beginning of Rahu. And I'll get into this more specifically when we get there. You were in a more, you were in a, I got to be me, a lot of energy. And then you settled down. And it was in the planetary periods because you are a settled person. You have a lot of balance in your chart. You have a lot of settle, and some people will be very moving, and they need that moving. Some people, where I grew up in New York, I didn't particularly. It's not my place. I wanted to leave. I left there as soon as I could. It's a wonderful place, and everybody moves there, but not me. I didn't have the chart there. I like going to another place where what we call a relocation chart. We take a chart of another place. It changes. It's the natal chart and it's turned slightly, different rising sign. Planets are all the same signs, but now the planets are in different houses. And we put the planets in different houses. We have a different, we get it's like beating our heads. We're still beating our head against a wall, but it's a different wall, and it gives us a very different viewpoint. Sun in seventh house. Sun is all about ego, and self is all about others. You move it to the first house, it's all about self. It's a very different point of view. And please, if any of that isn't clear, let me know.
No, that's clear to me so far. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So it fascinates me that some people are restless in Rome. Some people need to move because they just don't feel a wholeness. You have a wholeness where you're at, and that's why you've settled there. And we're going to show you why when we get to that. But for other people, it's just not where they feel comfortable, and they move. They may never go back. They may go back later on. And it's some people wear shorts in winter. Some people wear blue jeans, even to the fancy outfit. Some people drink their coffee at every meal. Some people never drink coffee. It's just the way things are. Everybody's a little bit different and they have their own energy. So I wanted to take the second paragraph and give you a little bit more. So for my personality, I'm a solo parent of two teenage boys. I can't uproot. Their father lives. I'm curious, though, to know once they're out of school, are there places in the world or Australia that are better for me? What about financially? Yes, there may be better for my soul's experience. Yes, it's better for the soul's experience because the personality can get out of the way so that the soul can just grow and expand financially, emotionally, relationship wise. All of the things by a different place you can have a completely different experience. You can be totally thumbs and not confident in one place and go to another place and be the life of the party and forget to be insecure. How? Mm-hmm. Because it's different energy there. Just some people are night people and some people are morning people. So if a night people in the morning, they're not very sharp. And so some people like it warm and some people like it cold. They don't like it when it's hot. And so that's part of it. So I believe the ley lines, so it's not ley lines. Ley lines are energy from the earth. Mm-hmm. This is these lines that we're going to see later on in the reading, the astrocartography lines, that's what they're called, are actually taking the chart, taking the planets and laying them onto the earth, and it's based on your natal information, your particular birth chart. My chart of my astrocartography is completely different than yours. And maybe within 5 minutes or an hour, even if we were born at the same time, they would be different enough to have aspects. Somebody I saw in a post recently, somebody said that he changed it. I forget, was it 5 minutes or 2 minutes? And everything was significantly different. Okay. So it's not the ley lines. Those ley lines are completely, those have to do with the power from the earth. This is something that we're projecting onto the earth, and my astrology can mean that some locations make it terrible for you financially and career-wise. It could be wrong there. No, that is correct. And I wouldn't say terrible, but I would say that challenge us, and they challenge us because they're not our strength. And so I had this example that I gave to a client recently who wanted to move to a place in the Southwest that's popular, New Mexico and Arizona. I'm in the US, I live in California. So she wanted to move there. And I said to her, I said, you want to learn guitar. And I've arranged it so that Stephen Stills, the famous guitarist, will Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Anyways, Eric Clapton. Doesn't
Yes,
matter.
Eric Clapton.
Okay, Eric Clapton is going to give you a free lesson, but you're going to do it in front of 200 people. And at the end, then you are going to play your best song. So I said, you want to do that? And she said, no. And I said, that's the way I feel too. You can't move there because those lines that place that you want to move, you've got these lines that are there that are going to make it so that I think it was a Sun and a Venus line that were not her strong planets. And so Sun, the low side of Sun, she gets high side of Sun, self-aware, low side of Sun, low self-esteem, insecurity, Venus, high side, inintegrity, low side Venus, judgments, comparisons, blaming, self-righteous. I said, do you want to be in those energies? No, I don't want to be in those energies. And you don't want to be in those lines. You don't want to have the free guitar lesson. There was a couple of people, and you may be one of those people that give me the guitar lesson. A few said, yeah, I want the guitar lesson. But most people say, that's not the way I want to learn. And so we don't want to go to those lines that are negative planets, not just planets, but the ones where we get triggered and we want to learn the guitar in the quiet in our own house. And then when we're good at it, then we'd love to talk to Eric, but we want to get to a level first. So is that clear? I wanted to answer these to just lay down some groundwork on the astrology questions that you had raised. So is that good? Or
yeah, that's clear. Would you say that a lot, the people that come to you for location readings, they have somewhere that they have in mind to move, and so they're just checking it? Would you get more people like that, or more people like me that just tell me what my chart says?
I think that there are some people that obviously come because they've been thinking about a particular. I think there's no one way. There's some people who are thinking about one place. There's some people that's the whole world. When you do the families, it becomes very complicated because then I learned to do an Excel chart where I could say, and I would go around the whole world because there's 12 signs. So there'd be 12 different relocation charts, including your birth chart. And I would do it for everybody. And for one couple, I did a point score. Where is the happiest for all the family? I did them on a 1 to 5. 5 is the relocation chart is the best, and 1 is the least. And then you've got to figure out what the lines based on this, because this relocation chart is approximately 2,000 miles wide. That's 24,000 miles around the Earth, 12 signs. So it's 2,000 miles wide. So you can be anywhere around the lines. If you want, I want more energy and I want to really focus on my career or my book and then you want to go on that Mercury line or that Mars line and you want to really dig up on it and you're really ready. But if you're young or insecure or some people want to go live on a mountaintop and they want to go away from those lines. They want to go for a more inward place. Most people want to go to an urban place where they meet people. I had a young client a few months ago, a 25 attractive young woman. She lived for 3 years in Amsterdam and never met anybody. I don't think that's possible. But she did that because there were no lines there and it was like inward for her.
Okay, interesting, very interesting. And why that's particularly interesting for me is that, as you saw in my notes, there was a period in my life where my family relocated to Papua New Guinea. And I could imagine that I stayed behind in boarding school and went there on the holidays. But how fascinating would it have been if my parents were that way inclined and said, hey, Indra, let me have a look at how this move to PNG is going to go before they chose to go to PNG. That would have been fascinating insight.
The thing is that that you moved about that, and we'll get into it later. You moved directly north, and so it didn't actually change much for you. You did move on the other side of some lines that are there where you are in Brisbane, but you just moved to the other side of those lines. And so it actually, astrocartography for location astrology, it actually wasn't much different for you.
Okay.
Interestingly enough.
Yeah, I loved it. They were gone. Bye.
Yeah. 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 You had, again, to finish this, you had mentioned that some of the dirtiness and the safety and some of the different social stratas, that's your Venus getting triggered. Those are Venus lines that you were next to. So when your Venus trigger,
Okay.
so when your Venus got triggered, it doesn't get triggered so much in Brisbane because it's more settled. It'll get triggered by individual people will trigger your Venus and get judgmental. But there, your Venus got triggered. You're on your Venus lines, and so you've got a little judgmental around the people around you because you were in this Venus energy. Okay, so and what I want to do now is I want to share the screen. I want to start by sharing the screen. And
I just make a little voiceover here that says that you can pop over to YouTube where this will be posted if you wish to see the screen rather than just listen to the audio.
So what we're going to start with, this is, so I have sent you your natal chart, your chart of your birth based on your time. And I'm a Vedic astrologer. I do sidereal chart, and the chart is actually rectangular. And so I am showing you a chart here of how you read, how you can start to read and understand the chart that I'm giving you, not the meaning of it astrologically, but a little bit of that, but basically just the basics. So it's not a round chart. So the first house is, and by the way, in sidereal, it's similar to Western. We use the same 12 houses. I don't use the outer planets, and I don't use asteroids, and we use the same signs. And the meaning of the houses is basically the same. It's a little bit different because I'm not so much a mundane astrologer. I'm more spiritual, so I want to take the deeper meanings of the houses. But you can apply all of your Western. Anybody that's listening, you can apply all of your Western. You just have to understand how to read the chart. So this first house here, I call this 12 o'clock. And in this chart that we're showing, it gives the meanings in the houses. And so the houses go counterclockwise. Second house is 11 o'clock and third house is 10 o'clock, around to fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh house, which is 6 o'clock on a clock, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, and 12th house, which is 1 o'clock. Okay. And the numbers in the chart, the natal chart we're going to look at in a minute, are not the house numbers. They are the sign numbers. And the signs are Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the natural order. And so anybody who take a screen save of this if you want, because this is a basic tool that you will use in order to be able to read the sidereal chart or any sidereal chart. Okay. So anything about that?
No, I think more questions will come as you explain further.
Okay. I like to ask in each one just to complete the energy with it. And then this is another chart. This is the next one in the PowerPoint that I gave you. This is the highs and lows of the planets. We're not talking about planets in good and bad. We're not talking about should or could. We're talking about good, high and low. That high energy means that it's very accessible, that you can access the energy of the planet. Low means that there's more compulsion and obsessions around the energy of the planet, that you're not a low Mercury. It's hard for you to communicate. It's hard for you to I'm not saying you have that. I'm saying in general, it's hard for you to communicate. You hold back what your feelings are. You don't really say, even though you want somebody to do something for you, you don't say it. That's a low Mercury. And so these are the highs and lows of the planets. They're a very good tool to look at. Okay. So with that in mind, we're now going to go over to, this is your natal chart here. I got that up at the top left. That's right. I want to make sure. By your name there. That got the right.
Yep. Now it's full screen.
Okay. So here's your chart now. And the first thing that I notice is that you have you're pretty balanced. You have you have you have the Kendra houses, these 1, 4, 7, and 10. So let me start here. So you have, let me go through your chart. So you have Cancer in the first house. So your Cancer rising in Vedic, it's going to be 24 degrees difference in Western. So your Leo rising in Western, but as Vedic, I have you as a Cancer rising, and you've got Saturn retrograde in that first house. It should still be, Saturn was probably, it should be retrograde in your Western chart. But anyways, that's Cancer in the first house. You've got Moon in the second house in Leo. You move into from a Virgo moon to a Leo moon. So you've got that Leo, but it's not Saturn, it's Moon. You've got an empty third house in Virgo. You've got in the fourth house, that's by the positions. The fourth house is Venus and Rahu. Rahu is the north node of the moon. That's in Libra, fourth house. You've got fifth house is empty. That's Scorpio. Your sixth house is Sun and Mercury. That's in Sagittarius. Your seventh house is empty in 10, which is Capricorn. Eighth house is empty in 11, which is Aquarius. 12 is Pisces. You've got Jupiter, ninth house. K2, south node of the moon in Aries. 10th house. Mars retrograde in Taurus, 2. 11th house, and Gemini is in the 12th house, and there's no planets there. Okay, so that's how we read it. So what I see here is a pretty balanced chart, and your Astrocartography shows that you can go everywhere and it's balanced. People that have 3 and 4 planets in the houses and maybe are only in 4 houses. I had a client I worked with a lot who had every planet, almost every planet was conjunct something. So wherever she went, it was very, for the lines, it was very complex for her. And it's still that way. She actually was in Morocco when the earthquake came. She's thinking about buying a place there, but was there for 3 weeks and having a crazy time. Morocco's a fun place, but it was really pushing on her because everywhere she goes, she has these double lines, and it's not easy. But you don't have that. You have 2 houses that have conjunct planets, but generally you're pretty well spread out apart around the chart. And so when you go to a place, it's pretty easy for you because there's not this duplexity of energies that there are people. I remember a client I had one time, I tried to find a place for her in her sun period, her sun Mahadasha, her great period, where she could be on the earth and have sun, be on a sun line, and there was no place. It was all over water almost everywhere.
Okay.
And that happens for people. It's part of their soul karma, that they're not going to have a place where they can calm down and relax. They're going to have to find it on the inside.
Yep.
A client once said to me, I want to find peace. I said, that's an inside job. That is not about where you go. That can help. But if you bring chaos with you, a place is not going to make you peaceful.
No.
So you have a very balanced chart. Now, when we get down to the Shad Bala here on the bottom, you have a lot of variation. Interesting, as balanced as your chart is, where the planets are in the houses, when you get to the Shad Bala, you're all over the place. And so you have very high Mars and Venus. And again, this is neither good nor bad. This is strong or weak. It's the ability to access the energy of the planets. And so your strongest is Mars and Venus. And you have the mid-grade here of Saturn and Moon and maybe Mercury. And then you come down to on the low side is Sun and Jupiter. And so low Sun means that you can have insecurity, or you can have self-esteem issues. And it can be that, because you don't seem that way to me, it could have been that when you were younger and that you worked them out, or it could be that they're young and you covered them over, because you also seem to me like a strong personality. And so we don't see you cover over, perhaps, with the forcefulness of your will to not let us see that you have a diminished sun. Okay.
I would agree with that. Yep.
I want to say here that I call my approach science and intuition. And so the science is that the science of the astrology it's the same things that I would say to everybody. But then we get into the intuition that kicks in, and I feel it comes from the client, that I get it from the other. So what happened is, I think, your strong personality, and so the intuition says that you're covering over the fact that the sun is weak. You don't want anybody to see it. And so the Jupiter is weak. And so expansion is a little difficult. And the expansion can be travel. It can be being in new places, but it can also be expansion within yourself. It can be that I had a client this week that took on a soloed having a second child by herself with a donor. But some of her, so she had tremendous courage doing that. But I got the feeling that some of her interpersonal stuff, that she puts up walls. She had some situations I won't go into, but that she needs more courage that way. And so you can be expansive in terms of travel, but expansive in terms of perhaps accepting other people's points of view, or expansive in terms of overcoming your low self-esteem, and being willing to, you seem to be willing to confront it by doing your session on air. So maybe you've grown there, but I would say when you were younger, the weak Jupiter shows that wasn't a strength. So do you want to comment on either any of those, or those two in particular?
It's exactly true. I would say that I had very low self-esteem in my primary school and high school years. And so I have done a lot of work on myself, thanks to everything that I've studied spiritually. And I would probably say that my determination to understand the mind and emotions and who I am has created the career that I do now, only post-COVID, which has put me in a spot where now I am feeling the most confident about what I'm here to do and why I'm here. And probably within myself, the most at peace with myself that I've ever been.
Beautiful. And the thing is that the sun and the Jupiter are weak in the natal chart. This is all natal chart. And so those can always be issues. And you seem to have worked with them and understand them. But when you come into where you have to expand and grow, you may have to catch your breath a couple of times to take the next level of that. That will always be. Ram Dass said, you want to be tested, go be with your family. So when you get into your family, perhaps, then the low self-esteem and the inability to expand comes out. So those are two key issues. And on the other side, your Mars is really strong. So the doing is never an issue unless your thinking mind stops you, or your insecurities stop you, or what will people think, or how will it look. When you forget all that, then you just move forward. And Venus strong means integrity is really important to you. And that you can take the high road and not worry about other people's integrity and not judge, or you can get a little arrogant and have that superiority because your Venus is so strong to say, why don't they get it? And the reason they don't get it is because they don't have a strong Venus. They're not at that place yet.
Yeah, exactly.
They're at the weak Jupiter. They're in a weak Jupiter, and that's so what I'm saying is that their integrity is an issue, where for you expansion is the issue.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I would say that for me, the low self-esteem comes in with, I allow and respect everybody's points of view. And I have a wonderful family who have always supported me, but my entire family, extended family, don't believe at all in any way, shape, or form in what I believe spiritually. Okay? So I would guess if you would say that my true self, trying to show my family true self, that's where my esteem goes down, because I don't feel understood, because they can't understand me because they don't believe what I understand. So they love me because they love me, but they don't get me. And I guess that's that whole feeling that we all look for recognition and understanding, but you also have to hold the space that you do you've got to do you, and your family, you got to do them. And so sometimes you're going to be a totally different ends of the spectrum. So, for example, I wrote a chapter in a book recently, and I was gonna last year, and I was never going to give it to anybody in my family. They don't even listen to the podcast, so don't worry about it. Because I thought they're not interested. And then I thought, no, you know what? I'm going to be proud of the fact that I talked about writing a book for a very long time, and I finally got around and did a co-contribution chapter. So I'm going to give it to them. Then they can never say that I didn't tell them. And if they don't read it, they don't read it. Right? And the comments that I got back were very lovely. Wow, this is a really well-written chapter. This is very interesting. Funny how we believe they're totally opposite than each other. And that's it. And I was like, okay, some of them read it, and that's good feedback, and we've acknowledged that we don't believe each other's things, but thank you for making the comment. So yeah, that would be my direct interpretation of what you just said.
Okay, beautiful. So the thing is that you have a strong Venus, and so you are able to go against the family's integrity and not have an issue with it. That puts you in a class by yourself. Having a low Sun and low Jupiter, that's not unusual, but your strong Venus says, I have the ability, I have the integrity within me that I'm going to do what I believe, and I'm not going to let the fact that they don't believe, that's because of this weak Sun. You have to dance around it a little bit, but then you say, no, I'm going to just do my truth, and I'm not going to worry about them. That's a strong Venus. And so many people in the Facebook and the astrology groups and things, there's, I want to do it, but my family won't let me. There's things that are holding me back. That's not your problem. You have a strong Venus. And so that's the nature of it. Excellent. And yes, it's not the Venus that gets triggered, it's the Sun that gets triggered. And when your Sun gets triggered, then Venus and Rahu conjunct, you stop being you. I'll get to that in a minute. But I want to do, there's a couple of other things that I want to do before we do that. I want to do dignity. It's on the middle at the bottom here. The dignity is the quality of the planet's energy and the sign that it's in. So Sun is great friend, neutral, Mars is enemy, friend, own, which is the best, neutral. They're all pretty good. You've got an enemy Mars. It's really strong Mars. You probably don't, and it's retrograde. So it's a little bit that the compulsions are strong, and you might push over people. You might get out there and doubt yourself. It's in your 11th house, so it's high energy, but so it's enemy, so it can be triggered. Like you're full bore, and then somebody you respect says, I don't know, and then you start hesitating.
Yeah. My dad, who's no longer with us, used to describe me as a bull in a china shop.
Yeah. So the strong Mars is the bull, and the china shop is the enemy, that it's a little bit triggered. Okay, natural. That's good dignity. And one other thing I want to show you before we get to the planets themselves is this thing that they call Vimshatari. I call it the Mahadashas, the Great Periods. And this is only in Vedic astrology. It's an incredible teaching that each of the planets in a 120-year cycle has a particular set of time that is the main influence in your life. And you were born, let me get one more here. You were born in Venus. You had 3 years in Venus before you went into Sun at 3 years old. Sun is 6 years long. So from 3 to 9, you were really strong in yourself. And interestingly, I was born, so you were born 3 years from the end of Venus. I was born 2 years from the end of Venus. So we have a very similar age that we go into these cycles at the same time. And so my 10 years of moon for you 9 to 19, mine was 8 to 18, were really hard years because it was emotional. I'm strong, assertive, and it was emotional. I couldn't deal with the emotions and a sensitivity, and it was more moodiness. And so you recognize this, and then you get into Mars. I get into Mars at college. You got into it a year after uni, and you were traveling and out there and living a way that hasn't been the way that you have lived since then. And interestingly enough, so you went into your Rahu period. It started in 2001. Rahu, gotta be me, got to express myself, the rebel. It's Robin Hood, stealing from the rich, giving to the poor. I gotta be me. You leave behind your culture, your family, people. You were young, so you weren't breaking up. Maybe you were breaking up relationships, but you're not breaking up marriage. In Rahu, you will move, you will foreign travel, you will leave the church, you will leave the relationship, you'll change jobs. You were young, it gave you the impetus with the low sun for you to, I got to be me, I got to express myself. And so you got more confidence and more assuredness. And as you settled into these and you started living the life the way you want, then you settled down back into Australia, which was interesting. And I want to get into that period later. But the point is, now you enter Jupiter in 2019. It's 16 years. Jupiter is in your ninth house of spirituality. It's whatever floats your boat. Whether it's kayaking, mountain climbing, or crocheting, I gotta do what I gotta do, and I gotta be expansive in that. 2019, right before COVID, actually December 23. We do the dates, the month is first. So December 23, 2019, right as COVID was starting, you were moving into Jupiter. And while everybody was closing down, you were expanding. You tell me your business has come on, not surprising. I think you feel what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. Yep. My life changed dramatically with COVID, very dramatically. 2019 was probably the worst year of my life until November 2019, and then since then my life has changed inexplicably. Okay,
so maybe I like to come back to this sometimes at the end, but you're in this Jupiter period. And so when you're talking about where do I want to be and what do I want to do, I'm going to take into account this Jupiter line. It's your weak line. It may be that moving to a Jupiter line, if you're ready for that challenge, Eric Clapton, if you're not ready for the challenge, don't move to Jupiter line. But if you're ready for the challenge, then moving to the Jupiter line and expanding beyond your need for things to be a certain way, your need for things to look a certain way, for people to act a certain way, that you become more spontaneous and more expansive, more committed, more not holding yourself back in any way. And it's not always the easiest period, because it does keep people a little on edge, because it's, if today is 2, then tomorrow is 3, and the next day is 4, and it becomes exponential. And so people have some difficulties with that. Okay. So with this in mind, so let me then go to the planets themselves. So you've got Saturn, Rahu, you've got Saturn retrograde in the first house. Saturn in the first house means that you have so Saturn is focus and discipline on the high side and fear on the low side. And so you're very regimented and organized in the way that you need to be. So the Jupiter, you need to feel organized even when things are expansive. You want to control. Saturn, the first house, you want to control things, and you don't want that spontaneous spontaneous expansion energy, because you can't control that. You need to be focused and disciplined. When you're not focused and disciplined, then you get afraid. And it's a Cancer. So a Cancer is a water sign, and so Saturn has difficulty in Cancer, even though it says neutral. For some people, I have no idea why this is. Sometimes the program comes up great enemy. Cancer, I don't think Saturn doesn't like Cancer. And so it's the watery side of your personality, and the Saturn likes rigidity and focus. It's more earthy, and it can have some fire. But as a water, Saturn isn't flowy at all. So do you recognize, and it's retrograde, so it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So do you recognize this in yourself? Do you want to talk about it and explain it?
So I would have to say the best way to explain that would be like when I was in high school, in my final 2 years at school, I was very regimented in my study, and I got exactly what I needed to get achieved out of high school and felt very satisfied. In the past few years, I would say that what I've gone through personally, through my own personal development and spiritual development to get to where I am today with what I needed to learn to do what I do as a service, has been, I conceptually and intellectually knew what I needed to do a podcast, to have a website, to do everything that you need to do to run a business. But it was it's been an emotionally like ripping apart your soul to deal with the upgrades, if you want to call them, or the experiences that I've had spiritually to get to where I am today, which have been the uncontrollable parts. And that has been the knowing that in a traditional business, I would be able to control and do things. But when you work and have to go through spiritual experiences so that you can do what you do as a spiritual service, that spiritual side of your development is totally uncontrollable. And that's where you feel, that's where fear comes out. And that's where you feel like you're pulling
beautiful.
your hair out.
You want to be you want everything to be sensibly organized, but because it's a spiritual path, there is no organization.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
So it conflicts with your need for organization, and that's the way that you need to expand. That's the way that your Jupiter period is going to expand you. And I assume it already has, and it will continue to in any way that you haven't gained yet. Okay. So that's Saturn. So you've got Moon in the second house in Leo. Moon likes the luminaries are like each other's signs. Okay. So Moon in Leo's second house. So basic necessities. You've got an emotional side. You've got the Saturn is like the rigidity. It's like in relationship, Saturn in the seventh house. You want people to be, I say, when he says he's going to be home at 6 for dinner, he better be home at 6. Now you've got Saturn in the first house. You don't have anything in the seventh house, but your relationships and your interconnection with the world and other people is through this Saturn energy. But now you come over to the second house, basic necessities, and you've got your Moon there. And so you turn into this emotional, sensitive on the high side and emotional on the low side. And it's so contrary to this Saturn in the first house that I can see the partner saying, "Who the heck are you?" You're organized, and then I don't know if you fall apart on the low side, but you get emotional, and it's like you're Jekyll and Hyde, and people are trying to understand that, and people don't understand. As an astrologer, you look at it, you can understand that we can have these contradictions in our lives, but as you're dating that, you go, "Whoa, what's going on here?" So that's the Moon. So when you get into your basic necessities, then you get the mother energy with your single mom with your kids, taking care of them and making sure I'm here and supporting them. That's your motherly energy, your Moon energy in the second house of basic necessities. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do the singletons and then we'll come to the doubles later. So Jupiter in the ninth house, it's in Pisces. Pisces is its own sign. Ninth house is spirituality. It's a focus on whatever floats your boat, whatever your passion is expansion. And so you're very expansive there. And again, that's different from Saturn. You've got this Saturn first house, that I want organization around me, but you get into your passions and there's no stability in that. It's expansive. It's never ending. It's very spontaneous. It floats everywhere. And so for you've come to grips with the two sides, but on the outside, sometimes we say, how I thought you were so organized, but so Jupiter's in the ninth house. It's a different energy. K2 in the 10th house in Aries, fire energy. K2 is the south node of the moon. It's wisdom on the high side. It's no momentum on the low side. And so your career is about wisdom, that it doesn't really matter what you're doing, but it's got to have wisdom in it. And if it doesn't have wisdom, then you're not interested. And so before, when your 20s and 30s, whatever your pre-career was, you needed to have wisdom in it. And that's not easy to find. It's easy to find in the spiritual world, but outside the spiritual world, it's not so easy to find. And so I imagine that was difficult for you.
Yeah, pre I was a management consultant and
Okay,
a university lecturer.
so you were bringing wisdom to it, but if your people went mundane and low energy on you, you didn't like that. You wanted the people to get it. You wanted them to meet you on your level, which isn't really you can't really expect that.
No, and integrity was the main thing that used to irk me. That was my trigger point, people's integrity in those fields.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So then you've got the last one of the singletons is Mars retrograde. It's in the 11th house. I call the 11th house realization. It's the fulfillment. And so you do to fulfill. And it's retrograde, so it's not a 3 steps forward, 3 steps forward. It's got a 2 steps forward, 1 step back energy to it. Is that you bull in the china shop, or you get so excited and you go off on tangents and don't realize it until you're a little bit down the road. When the personality stories come in, then you get deflected from your real purpose, and you do it to compensate and for obsessions. On the low side, Mars; on the high side, doing; on the low side, fear to do. Those are on the right side of the chart. This is the visible sky, the day sky part of the chart. I like to think of it as the galactic gases side. So your Mars and your Jupiter are very well placed for you to do your doing in expansive and bring in wisdom in galactic gases. So now on the left side, I'm going to do the 2 houses that have 2 planets in there. There's Venus and Rahu. Rahu is the north node of the moon. We're in the 4th house here in Libra. It wants to be balanced. Venus is integrity on the high side, and judgments and criticism and self-righteousness on the low side. Rahu, gotta be me, gotta be the rebel, I gotta let the tiger loose, I gotta be Robin Hood, I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. It's the teenage rebel years that can be in any years. So when they're conjunct, they go up together and they go down together. So when they're on the high side, then it's the 4th house of the 4th house of home. It's not only the home you live in, but it's a groundedness in your own being. And so when you're grounded in your own being, then you're in integrity, and then you are your rebellious self. Then you got to be you. When you're not in integrity, then you get judgmental and critical, and then you hold your tiger back, and you're not grounded. So do you relate to that?
Yep, I do.
Okay.
I don't have anything to say to that, but yeah.
And then the last one then is Sun and Mercury. It's in the 6th house. It's in Sagittarius. So we've got another fire sign here. You've got 3 fire sign houses, by the way. So you've got the fire, even though you're Cancer rising, and that is going to be confusing to people because you're the watery and sensitive, but yet you're strong. And so the ladies say, "Oh, I wish I could be like that," and maybe you say, "It's not so good over on here," but whatever. It's just the nature. So Sun on the high side, self-aware; on the low side, low self-esteem, diminishing of self. Mercury, need to communicate; low side, afraid to communicate. So 6th house, physical plane difficulties. And so what do you bring to physical plane difficulties? You bring yourself and your ability to communicate. And I think that's what you're probably doing in your work, even though it's soul work in the sense that it's not grounded. It's not grounded. Souls, I think of as not very grounded on the earth, but I think you're doing that in order to help people to be grounded on the earth, that you're using that your Sun, and even before this work that you did, that you're doing now, from what I hear in your story, is that you always had Sun and Mercury in that's what did you say, what kind of analyst consultant?
Management consultant.
Management consultant. So you're bringing yourself to physical plane problems, and you are bringing your communication to physical plane problems, and now you've turned it into the spirituality, because in 2019 you went into Jupiter period, and now you're not trying to prove yourself as much as you are trying to expand yourself and share and share however you can to support everybody's growth.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's your chart. And so the lines that are that are near you are the Venus and Rahu lines, and that's why its integrity is really important down there. When you're balanced. Again, I said it's a balanced chart, and your Venus is in Libra, so this balance between the Saturn and the Moon Jupiter is part of your work, and the balance of having your Venus and your Rahu there in Libra, the sign of balance, and then the balance of being there in Australia, where you are in Australia, where you've got these lines, and I'm going to show you those in just a minute. So we're going to leave the chart. Any questions or anything about this?
No, that's good for the moment. Thank you.
Okay. So what I want to do is I'm going to give you 5 minutes on location astrology, astrocartography.
Okay, great.
Okay. So the way this works here, I've now put up a different screen, is that so in astrology, all astrology, perhaps, most astrology, there are 3 kinds of houses. There's the ones that are called angular houses or cardinal houses. That's the first, 4th, 7th, and 10th houses. They deal with self. That's the signs would be Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. The second type of houses is called a Succedent house. It's fixed energy. It's 2nd, 5th, 8th, and 11th. The signs you can see there, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And the third kind is the Cadent houses. That's more mutable energy. Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. It's 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 12th houses. And you can see at the middle on this screen here is that it goes angular, Succedent, Cadent, angular, Succedent, Cadent, angular, Succedent, Cadent. And I like to refer to these like a relationship. So it's hot and heavy at the beginning, that's cardinal energy. It's mundane in the middle, that's fixed energy. And then at the end, Sally says, "You guys still together?" And you say, "Well, it depends on the day." That's mutable energy. And so that's the 3 kinds of energies that are existent in astrology. In location astrology, we're only concerned with the angular houses. The 0 degrees of the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th house is said to be the place of strongest energy.
Okay.
But these lines, so these are the degrees of the lines. These are the placements that's how we figure out the lines. Not that we figure it out, the computer figures it out, is it's based on those particular positions, but those lines don't mean the same. The first house line on the ascendant line is an expression. It expresses itself in outward energy, self-oriented outward energy from the personality, the extension of self, the extension of ego on the negative side, the extension of your self-fulfillment, first house. And if you want to work on yourself, then we take you to the first house energy or first house lines.
Yep.
The 7th house lines are the descendant line. That is the interaction with other people. You want relationship, we take you to the 7th house line. You're dealing with other people, your reaction to other people. The 10th house line is called the midheaven line. It's the place of the noon sky, wherever you are in the world. At noon, it's the placement of the sun, and that's career. That's one's outward energy, both into society, but outside oneself, not the self, first house self, but it's taken out into the public life. The 4th house line, the place of the midnight sun, so it's below you on the earth, is the core grounding in oneself, in family, and in classes, and you're grounding in yourself and in your society. And so if people want to be grounded, then we send them to a 4th house line. Okay.
Yep, I got you.
Okay. And then we go to this, they call this a solar map. This is any moment on the earth. This is happening at every moment. This is one particular moment. At the same time, you've got a sunrise all over Asia on the left side of this, on the right side of this chart, all over Asia. They're moving from dark to light. That's called sunrise. No, yeah, that's called sunrise. They're coming into sunrise. And over here at the exact same moment on the east coast of the US and in Latin America, they're going to sunset. They're going from dark to light. This happens all at the same time. And the lines in the astrocartography the curved lines are these first and seventh house lines. They look like one line because they're connected, but they're actually two separate lines. One is first house line, one is seventh house line. And the vertical lines, the straight up and down lines, are the fourth and 10th house lines because it's noon everywhere on a north-south basis.
Okay, yep.
Okay, now why is the line curved, the first and seventh? Because when the sunlight hits the Earth, because the Earth is a ball and it tips this way, it looks like it's a straight line when you look at it from the side, but actually it creates this curved line because it's a ball. It goes like this rather than goes like this. That's why it's a curved line.
Okay.
Okay. Now, so when we cast a chart, we ask you two questions. We ask you three questions, but they're basically two questions: time and space. What date and time were you born, and where? So we fix time and space, but you don't have to fix either time or space in order to do an astrology chart, because there are people that believe in conception time. And so I don't know how they figure it out, but they put in a time based on conception and they draw a chart that way.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, and you can change space. And this is what we do with the relocation chart. And so it's like the old rotary phone, that the planets stay in the same signs, but the whole thing changes as you go west. It moves from first house to second house. So you're a Cancer rising. If you go west, then you become a first planet shift to the first and second house. If you go west, I think you turn, anyways, you go one way, and then if you go east, it shifts from 12th to, so first to second house. So your Cancer, you must have, then Cancer goes to the second house, and so then you become a Gemini rising as you go west. And if you go east, then you become a Leo rising. It goes clockwise, and it just shifts around. And as you go around, you go +1, +2, +3. You just turn from 4 in your first house is Cancer to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8, and the whole thing turns. And so your Mars, your 11th house Mars, maybe it moves down to your 10th house. And then all that Mars energy, rather than being about realization, it becomes about your career. It completely changes its focus. It doesn't completely change. You bring your natal chart with you. That's why we spend a lot of time with the natal chart at the beginning of this, because we need to know what we're bringing with us. But as it changes house, that's like you have a different perspective on your Mars energy all of a sudden. And as you move to Europe, you have a very different perspective, that Mars may move into your relationship 7th house. And all of a sudden, all of your doing, rather than being realization, spiritually high value, a high value focus, now it's on relationships and other people, that all you're doing is, hey, let's get together and do something. Where you have an empty 7th house, that's not what you would normally say. But and I'm not saying that your Mars moving to the 7th house, but wherever that is, wherever you go, that's the way it's going to be. So is this clear?
Yep.
Okay, so that's how we do the relocation chart when we get to it. And then the last piece here is the remote activation. You don't actually have to go to a place in order to feel the energy of that particular place. So we have a picture of Venice here, and anybody who's been to Venice is already drooling for the food or thinking about what a wonderful time they had in Venice. And so by hanging with the language, by listening to your Italian opera, by putting on your Italian shoes or your Italian clothes, getting a pizza, even if it's not an Italian pizza, it will take you to your Italian memories. Speaking the language, watching an Italian-based movie, hanging with Italians will activate the energy of that place for you, your relocation chart in that particular place. And I think with your soul work, I think you might be interested. This might be an interesting concept for you.
Yes, I didn't realize that, just that you, just by doing that, you were activating those energies That's interesting.
Okay, so now we're going to get over to here's your relocation. So let's start with Australia. So, and I'll go in a little bit closer here. So I know Brisbane is somewhere in here. We're looking for within 400 miles, and I think these lines are within 400 miles. So this is your fourth house Venus, and this is your fourth house Rahu line. And that's the light blue and the light green. And then this is Saturn. This is first house Saturn line. That's a little bit further out. And so when you went down to Sydney, you got really close to that. You had all three down there. So you had that Saturn line. So you could be even more organized in Sydney. You don't feel it so much in Brisbane. It's pretty far away from you to feel it there. And up here in Papua New Guinea, is that right here? Papua New Guinea? Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so I want to show you that on the upper left corner, and so people can see this. In the upper left corner, you see that? You see a place there? Upper left corner of the chart? So if I put a cursor, you can see where it is. So if you want to know where it is, we can put the cursor and put a city, but that's a place. You can see it's Papua New Guinea. So you really moved right onto those lines. Where you were, which I think is about here, you were actually west of the lines rather than east. West isn't as strong, but you were much closer to them. So I would imagine they were even stronger. That's why you don't, again, you didn't talk about it. You may have just as many feelings about the Aboriginal in Australia living in that area. The Glass Mountains, I read, was more, you may have had the same feelings you had in Papua New Guinea, but you were younger and you were right on those lines. And so your judgments and your criticisms that come up is that, why can't we do it the way we do it in Australia, where everything's fair and above board, and up here it's third world, as you said, and so your Venus gets triggered, and your Rahu, you may be yourself, but you're more obsessive about it. You're more compulsive. It's in people's faces rather than just being, I'm myself and nobody knows. Do you recognize any of this? Does it make sense to you?
Yeah.
Based on your experience?
Because if I was to say it from how it makes me feel, it makes me feel less able to enjoy myself when I'm focusing on inequalities, or when it's in my face, my brain goes straight to it and I'm not relaxed. So
yeah. And so how are you not relaxed? You're not relaxed because you can't be yourself in the Rahu. You can't be your rebellious self, and you get triggered in your integrity and you become judgmental and critical.
Yeah.
That's what the lines do.
Okay, interesting.
Okay. So I went through all of that. You went to Germany. So let's go. There's going to be a lot of moving around here with these screens. It's just the only way I can make it work here. So you went to Germany.
That's all right.
You've got this 10th house sun line in Germany. Beautiful. Right through the middle of Germany here. Let me get in a little closer here. Right through Berlin. Really beautiful. You didn't go to Scandinavia. Not surprising. This vertex that is pretty crazy. So you don't want to be up there, but this beautiful, simple. And I love that you have these pastel lines in Europe. You said Europe is better than the US. You've got these pastel lines there. There's in areas where you didn't go, where there are no lines. You went to London. You have Mars. That's fourth house Mars. And let me explain this just for the people out there who are watching, and for you too. So I see that's fourth house from the chart that we showed before. I didn't mention to take a screenshot of that, but hopefully people will do that. That's the Mars symbol there. You got to look up the symbols. I know it more by the color than the symbol. And so then you've got Moon. That's seventh house, the DS Moon. So more relationships, and relationships is really geared up. You don't have that in your natal chart. You don't have it in Australia, but come to London, boom, you got seventh house Moon. And I would imagine the relationships, whether intimate or not, were more important in London than they had been in other places, because you're coming into a seventh house, living on a seventh house line there.
Interesting point. Let me just give an example because this is really interesting. So when I lived in London, because it's quite common for Australian teenagers to do uni and then move to London, right? Really common. So the people that I went to boarding school with, who were friends, but you live with them, but you didn't necessarily socialize with them. When we were all in London together, we did a whole lot of stuff together. And then now that we're all back in Australia, we have nothing to do with each other.
There you go. And maybe that was part of the group energy, but you were at least, maybe they all would have done that anyways, but you were part of it. Where you, if they did it in Australia, you wouldn't be as much drawn to be part of it.
Yeah, totally not. Totally not part of them.
So that's the idea. If it's a your moon is happy, and so you go to that moon energy, and it's good. If it's a tense energy, like in Papua New Guinea with those moon with the Venus and Rahu, then it becomes stickly, and that's the whole Eric Clapton idea. Is that do you want to confront your difficulties in front of people, or do you want to do it on your own? And most people, that's the better way to do it. That these lines can be too intense and too confrontive for people.
Right. Yes. Interesting. Okay.
You went, so we did the Germany. That's a good place for you. And you, Brisbane, and you were in London 6 months. You went back to Brisbane for a relationship that didn't work out. You needed the relationship in London, not in Brisbane. But maybe the being in London made you attractive to the idea of relationship. And by the time you got back to Australia, that disappeared because that energy, that moon, the moon 7th house line, that's an intense line. That's a biological clock is ticking kind of a line. You feel that line. That's you're home alone Saturday night. You feel that on a Mars 7th house line. You don't feel it in Australia. Okay. I was in Nepal when you went to Nepal. I was in Nepal when the king got killed and all that. I went every year, and it was a total mess. So you don't have any lines in Nepal. You've got a moon line there. That's your 4th house moon here. See at the bottom, you've got your 4th house moon. It's in eastern Nepal and Kathmandu. Oh, here's Pokhara. So yeah, you would have been close there. So that would have been a part of it. That's your line in Nepal. So then you got married and you never traveled. I think you mentioned later, I want to bring this up. So I want to show you the US. I love it. In Europe, you have those really colorful lines. I call them pastel lines, but in the US, on the west coast here, you've got this Uranus line. On the east coast here, you've got this Neptune line here, and you've got a nice moon line, a 10th house moon line. So for career, you want that for career, you've got it in the US, and you've got your Jupiter and your Rahu are really on top of each other here through Colorado and down through Tucson, Arizona. But other than that, it isn't that same easy, colorful, spread out that you have in Europe. I can see why it doesn't look very inviting. And I suggest to people that even though you may not know what it all means, that people can see that it doesn't look as inviting and colorful. Europe looked like an Easter egg. This doesn't look that way. This looks closer to Halloween than it does Easter egg.
Yeah. What's really interesting is that over 90% of my podcast listeners are from America, which fits with that career line.
Yeah, that career line. Yeah. And that they love what you do. That's a remote activation, that you're in Australia and they're loving it there. Interesting.
Yeah, Australians aren't really interested in my podcast at all.
Yeah, and you don't seem to take it personal, where people can.
Yeah, I have, and interestingly, I have no desire to try and use my energy to influence it so that I rank in Australian podcasts. I'm much more, okay, the Americans love me, let's just go with the Americans. Do you know what I mean? It's just natural. It feels more natural.
That you want to be there, but yeah, maybe the
no
10th house moon line through the almost the center of the country. That line is that's going to cover a lot of distance, and so that's a possibility. You also mentioned at the very end, you mentioned Alaska as a place you'd want to visit, and interestingly enough, you've got the Saturn, you've got a first house, a 10th house Saturn line in this part of Alaska here, Juneau. But if you go over to Anchorage, which I guess would be a better place for you, you've got this 7th house Jupiter, and you've got Mercury here. This is first house Mercury, and so that would be a really interesting place for you to be, the Jupiter and the Mercury. It's not any of those energies that you're really around. That you've got so much of that Venus and Rahu in Australia where you are, Sydney and everything. But if you go to interesting in Alaska, not Juneau, but in their Anchorage and anywhere there, you've got these nice lines up there that can be really good for you. So that's while we're there, I wanted to mention that.
Interesting.
And then you settled down in Australia. Well, let's go back here. So you settled down in Australia and you moved inland a little bit closer to these lines. I don't know how far you actually got there.
Yeah. So I moved halfway between Sydney and Melbourne. So yeah.
That's where you live now?
No, where I did live for a while.
Oh, where you did live for a while. So you got closer to Saturn and you went right on those lines again, like Papua New Guinea.
Yeah.
And I think you have to say there's an attraction. Maybe it's a soul attraction. Maybe it's a personality attraction, whatever it is. I can't say. It could be both. And you have to differentiate them, that they look different.
Yeah. No.
That you want pizza and it makes you feel good when you have pizza. So there's two things going on. And so interestingly, you moved down. Melbourne's a little bit quiet. You're far away there from the Rahu line. You're further away from the Venus, probably. I don't know how many miles or kilometers. Do you have any idea? The Rahu or the Venus line from Melbourne?
It's about 6 hours drive from where I was married to Melbourne to 600
so
kilometers.
I would call that you're getting into 350, 400 miles. And so that's at the outskirts. When you got to Melbourne, you were in more of a quiet zone. And let me talk about a quiet zone. Some people need the quiet zone. And there are times in your life when the quiet zone is good. I had a client a while ago who was she was living locally here, and the lines weren't very good here. And she was going to go to South Carolina to live with her daughter for a while. And I said, great, there are no lines there. You need a cool out place. You need to get out of the bad lines and get your head clear and go to the quiet lines. I can call it living on top of the mountaintop. When in those times in your life when you want to go live on the mountaintop, so go live there. And then when you get clear, 6 months, a week, 6 months, 2 years, whatever it is, then you know where to go. But you can't make that decision by living in those lines because you got vada deranged. You're not grounded enough to be able to figure it out. You can't you're shadow boxing these energies that don't feel good to you.
So anywhere where so that then also means if you're looking for a really restful, away from everyone holiday, then you want to go to that kind of a descriptive place.
It could, but
could be.
If you want to meet people in bar scene because you want to kick up your heels, then maybe you want to go to a Mars line. But yeah, all things being equal, if you really want to relax and you don't want to deal with your ego and you don't need to attract anybody, then go to a quiet place, get out of the lines. But if you need people to look at you while you're dancing, then you maybe need to go to a Mars line or or a moon line, or to get your energy going. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I don't want to be, I'm using those as examples. I'm not making any judgments about them, but just that you may need, that you need to take care of yourself, and that may be that you're partying all the time for a week, and you don't want the quiet place because you won't meet anybody. You want to meet people, even if it's not lasting.
Yep.
So, okay. So you settled down and you never traveled, and you went to New Zealand. You got a moon line in New Zealand, depending on where you went. That's your first house moon. You keep following the moon lines here. I think I think there's some indication there. And then on the South Island, where if you went to Lord of the Rings, which was South Island, so there you have a Neptune line there, and the outer planet lines, which I'm not really an authority on them. I call them spicy. If you're spiritual,
Okay.
you can handle them. But how much spice do you want in your Mexican food or your Indian food? In India, they say you want it spicy. I say yes. So it's all hands on deck. So if you handle spicy, then the Uranus line there or Neptune line, they're fine. But some people are really distracted by them. They're just too intense. They're too that they they bother their nervous system. That it's too confrontive. It's too intense. I always got to be thinking about remembering my breath, and I don't want to do that. I just want to be able to remember when I remember. I don't want to have to remember. And so these very confrontive. The outer planets can be very confrontive. They don't seem to be very easygoing, and just, "Oh, yeah, sure, take it if you want it, fine. If not," they're pretty demanding, like Saturn. They had that more demand, like Saturn. So
Yeah,
uh
if I was describing, I think I've written it in there, what I envisage, and what I envisage changes a lot. But if I was to be focused on, if there was one thing that I wanted to do before I die, career-wise, that I would feel regret about not doing, it would be to be somewhere where I can just write. I've got folders upon folders upon folders of books that I have preconceived ready to go, right? And I need somewhere peaceful and quiet to write them, but I don't want to feel isolated. So I want to have a little bit of interest, which is what I write about. I like a little bit of culture, and I like a bit of, so that's why I like being wedged between mountains and the beach, because it's like the beach is like when I want to come out and be social, and then the mountains is when I just want to retreat, but I want to access both of that. Do you know what I mean? I call myself like a extroverted introvert. I like a lot of alone time, but then when I go out, I like it to be social, but then I've got to come back into my shell and be alone again. You know?
so that place may be is that Adeline for you? Over that green line there?
All right.
That's a fourth house Mercury, so you're grounded in your communication. That seems to be a good place to write from. You could go to Perth. You've got your sun line there, and you've got your 10th house Jupiter. You want to be expansive, you need more ideas, you go to Perth.
Okay. Yeah, I can tell you I'm not going to Adelaide.
Okay, I don't know. It doesn't have anywhere in there. I'm just talking about that part of the chart.
Yeah. Yeah, no, interesting. Okay.
But I mean, you want to develop it, and you've also got the Uranus there, and so you've got some depth to it. Depending on what you're writing, you've got some depth there. But that's the way you would figure it out. And I'm going to show you some other places. I'm not going to go through the whole list of places you gave here, because I've gone through the continents, and we don't need to go to all the places in France and all over.
That's within Australia.
Yeah, so that's the nature of it. And so you feel more at home in Europe than the US. We talked about that. I was briefly a travel writer photographer, and then you said freedom is something that my soul craves. So I underlined freedom. So what kind of freedom are you talking about? is this the soul has freedom, so I'm not sure that it's the soul is craving. So what is it that you're not feeling free in? Because that's what's holding you back from feeling the freedom that's already here right now, full time, 24/7. The freedom is here.
Yeah, true. Yeah, good point. I'd have to reflect on that more.
That's important, because the thing is that freedom is a key word for you. And what is the freedom? So if I look at your chart, it may be the freedom from Saturn. It's the freedom from the need to have everything organized and rigid. You want to be spontaneous and be in your sweatpants all the time, your pajamas all the time, and not have to put on makeup and get organized. I'm just making things up.
Exactly, precisely.
That is
if I could say, if we just take an analogy to dating for a second, the one thing that gets me really irritated is if I date somebody who expects me to organize everything. I want to do things spontaneously. I want them to surprise me. I want to not have to think about it, because I hate having to think about all this parental stuff. And so I'm like, I just want opportunities and interesting things to do where I don't have to think about it. So I don't match up well with people who expect me to. They see my energy and go, oh, she likes to be in control. But actually, I guess that freedom that I'm craving is about that the spontaneity, exactly what you talked about. I love that spontaneity where I don't have the responsibility to map it out and plan it out.
Yeah. So you're having this silent argument with Saturn, and Saturn's telling you need to be organized, and you're saying, I don't want to be organized. I want to go over to my fourth house and be grounded, and I can be the rebellious self. Or I go over to my ninth house and have fun, and I can be the expansive self. I think it's important. I'll read the sentence one more time. Freedom is something that my soul craves. I think the soul has it if the soul wants it. It's the personality that's feeling boxed in by the rigidity of Saturn. And so that's something that you got to make friends with Saturn. That's what I tell people. I'm 17 years into the 19 years of Saturn. It's been the most amazing period of my life. And I want to say that it helped me. I have books that I've started, and I've been able to finish them. And well, you finished them too. You're not in Saturn, but I needed Saturn. I needed to find a Saturn wife. I met my wife in India in 3 months before I started Saturn. We're now 17 years together. I'm 17 years in Saturn, and her focus and discipline of a strong Saturn first house person, and loving my spontaneity for her, it helped me to focus so that I could actually finish the works, and go through the maturity. I don't think it was that I wasn't so much focused, what was part of it, but I also needed the maturity to come through in order to be able to write what I wanted to write. What I wanted to write, I wasn't ready to write. I wrote, but it wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't, not that I wanted, it wasn't what it could be. It wasn't ready yet. And we have to be patient, talking to you and to everybody else listening, that you have to be patient to wait for your time. That it's not that the time you get the idea and the time that that you realize that idea, like you might have been a little kid, you might have been thinking about having a kid. So 20 years later, you have a kid, and then you think about him as an adult. That's another 20 years. So it isn't all at once. You get the idea, then you get the drive, then you get the ability to focus and complete. It's not all at the same time. And we can overcome the timings by being. So I wanted to say before that the astrology chart is all about personality. that it's all a personality for this life. And yes, us astrologers, we can take it to be past lives and future lives and all that, but it's the astrology, and we can overcome those positions. We overcome them by moving, we overcome them by being mature, we overcome them by awakening to what's holding us back. And so when we realize, for example, in this particular situation, that your freedom is about Saturn, then you make friends with Saturn, and then you realize that you have a joke. When you feel that you're too organized, then you have a laugh to yourself and you say, yep, there's Saturn again. And you become friends with Saturn and realize that if he's a he's pushing you along, and it's okay. He's just, because you need that, because if you didn't have that, then you might be only spontaneous and only assertive and not organized. He's your best friend. Doesn't mean that you like him all the time, but he's your best friend.
Yep, sure. I understand that. Cool.
Okay. So then you said there's a lot of life that is still to be lived. So I'm just curious about what you can see about me from the location astrology and what's good for me. If I could pretend that I could pack my life and had no constraints whatsoever, where would it be a wonderful place for me to be? I don't need to be anywhere for work, as my work is conductive remotely and I am self-employed. I think the Europe is a good place. And I also wanted to show you, and also you can look at the map and tell me, but I see this nice sun line. And again, the question is, what do you want to do there? Do you want to work on your career? Then you go 10th house. If you want to work on being more assured, then you go to your sun line. If you want to work on communication, then you go to your Mercury line. So you didn't really express that. And I don't need an answer, but that's part of the answer. But I see this nice sun line here in Thailand. If you like Thailand, that's a nice place to go. You got a nice Jupiter line here in Bali, but you've also got Pluto, so I wouldn't necessarily go there. Where, and like your chart is like everything is equidistant. You're really spread out. You do have the Venus and the Rahu are always together, and that's you. You're not going to ever separate Rahu and Venus. It's always going to be integrity and I got to be me. It's always going to be that way. But I see a lot of single lines spread out, and I don't normally see that. That nice sun line going through Germany is a nice place for you. Where do you see simplicity and lines that are attractive to you? What is it? What is the energy that you're looking for? That's the question that I would need you to answer. And you don't have to answer it now because that isn't the reality now.
Yeah, no, I know that.
What's going to happen is you've got, what did I say, 2019, 2035. So when does theoretically 5 years, so 28?
Yeah.
So then you've got 7 years more in Jupiter, and then you're going to move into Saturn. And what you want in Jupiter and what you want in Saturn may very well be different energies. What you can handle, what you're attracted to. Jupiter is outward expansion, and Saturn is inward. What you're saying now in Jupiter is I want there to be a little scene. In Saturn, you may not say that.
Okay, interesting.
Because just as I like to say in Saturn, by the time my eyes, I call it living in a cave, living in a cave, and I say by the time my eyes adjusted, there's so much texture on the walls here in Saturn Mahadasha that there's enough to do here for this life and about 4 more. I don't really need, the outside has almost completely disappeared for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I get you.
Okay.
So I guess the pink line, isn't it, is the relation, is where you've got the relationship. That's the one we were looking at. So yeah, one doesn't want to grow old alone. So that is still through Europe, isn't it? The moon. Yeah,
that London is, that moon and Mars is a nice combination, and it takes you out of that Venus Rahu, which you've had enough of that. I think that's like a safety valve. That's a comfort zone. It's like a comfort food for you. Go back to pizza. It's like a comfort, that Venus Rahu. When you get too close to it and you get triggered, then it's agitating. But I think that's grounding for you, being near that Venus line. And I think that not being near it, you're going to get to a place, to me, I got about 30 years on you, and like this, like life is cycles. You think it's the whole thing is going to be this way, but it's only for 5 or 10 years. Like the traveling you did in Europe when you were in your Mars period, that completely left. And so going back to those Mars, the Saturn, the Spain, you can have that same line in London. You can get warmer in Spain. Everybody wants to know about Spain.
Yeah, I really liked
Portugal.
Spain when I lived there, when I was traveling there.
And,
yeah, that's
and
what I was
Ireland,
saying.
you asked about Ireland, and Ireland has got the Ireland isn't so good. You've got this, you don't have any of the Easter eggs. You've got that Uranus line.
Yeah. Can you zoom in just a minute back to the Spain, France sort of regions? I just want to have a closer look.
Which one? Australia?
No, Spain, France. Can you just?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Barcelona, Madrid, and anywhere in between. You got the whole coast there.
Yeah, I like the coast of Spain. Interesting. Oh, that was what I wanted to ask. The other place that I always felt drawn to was that sort of Iceland, Greenland area, which is kind of like the same appeal that I have with Alaska. What does it look like up that way?
Okay, I just mentioned that, but we'll get closer to that. Oh, actually, that wasn't. I guess it was Ireland. I was. Maybe it wasn't Ireland. I saw Iceland, and I was thinking it was Ireland. It wasn't Ireland. So Iceland. Yes, Iceland too. Interestingly enough, you have have Sun and Mars up there.
Yeah.
I see this. So this is first house Sun, and this is seventh house Mars. So really interesting. There's a place where you can meet people and you can be yourself. So it's a really liberating place.
Iceland.
Yeah.
Well, there you
I
go.
want to make sure people understand Iceland and Alaska were two places that she mentioned that she had a desire to travel to.
Yeah, and what we've seen is that both are pretty nice places for me. That's why I've had that urge.
Yeah, and I want to mention that when I see this, I want to mention to people to trust your intuition, because your intuition is good. Depending on where you pick in Alaska, your intuition is good. You found a kind of a needle in a haystack. So trust that intuition, but you can only trust the intuition when you get out of the head. You can't figure it out. You got to just feel it. And so I would suggest that you just trust your intuition, that within this map that you have, you can go back to where you can look, but it's the old between the bird and the book, believe the bird. And so whatever the map says, there may be it may be intense, but it may be a reason for you to go there. If you feel it, I'm not saying you should always check it out, but there are reasons to check out these lines just to make sure that because there may be a reason that it's coming up.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and very interesting that I've never ever really been. While I've thought they've been beautiful countries, I've never felt an urge to travel to Scandinavia, so Sweden, and then look at the hodgepodge. It's a mess of lines.
Yeah, that's your vortex. Mine is over Iceland, so that's why I may go or I may not go. But that's mine is over Iceland, not in Scandinavia. No, that would not be a good place for you. And you speak so lovingly. I've been to Brisbane, and I've been to the Gold Coast, and I've been to Sunshine Coast, so I know where you're living. And why move from there? I think that within there, I think that you need to get out of your own boxes of limitations. And it has to do with the Saturn energy, making friends with Saturn and allowing yourself to be spontaneous, because I wanted to comment on what you said, is that I totally understand what you're saying, but I can be, let's say I'm your date and I see you so organized around the kids and doing everything, and I see your house is organized and you're organized as life, and then we get together and you wanted to be spontaneous and no organization, and I'm going, Jekyll and Hyde, which one is she? And it's going to take a special guy to be on time so that your Saturn side is happy, and then spontaneous, because if he gets there late, you're not going to like that. Once he gets there, then he can be spontaneous. So he's dealing with a little nitroglycerin here. He's got to really dance a fine line here. And you have to recognize that. And in recognizing that, when you let that go, then it won't be a problem. And you get to a place where you just laugh. You laugh at yourself that you're thinking this way, that I want him to be here on time. And then once he gets here, then it doesn't matter. And you have a lightness about it, rather than you're a gripping. I'm holding on to something, because people have to learn to flow with what may seem like inconsistencies. They're consistent to us, but they may not be consistent to them, because they don't have these two different energies going on. They have different energies going on, but not the same different energies going on.
And it's also interesting just to see that moon line going all the way through Europe, because I've always felt like I married an Australian, and I've always felt, and people have always said to me, your problem is you need a European male for your personality. And I just find that's interesting. That's where those lines are, because I've always thought, I don't feel understood by Australian men. Blanket statement, but
what I would say to that in response is that I say to some people, some ladies, you need a more mature person. I wouldn't say Australian or not Australian. I would say that you need somebody mature that can that they're strong within themselves, so that they're not pushed around about you're being strong and then you're being weak, and it's which one is it? Is I don't care. I love them both. Be whatever you want. I'll just flow with it. But you got to let me know. I'd say to my wife, I'll cut it however you want. Just tell me, because I know that it's important to you how I cut the vegetables. Just where do you want me to put the dish? I don't care, but just tell me where's the right place. Because I don't work in right place. I just work in convenient place. That she understands that my criteria is completely different, but I'm willing to do her criteria. It's just that I don't think that way.
Yeah, I get that.
And so we make peace not by doing it the same way. We make peace by giving each other the space to live how we need to live, how we are. Not that we need to live, but how we are.
Yeah,
in the personality.
Yep, very interesting.
That is, at the end, you talked a lot about Brisbane. I don't see why you should leave that area. It's got everything. And maybe you leave to have other kinds of experiences. Do you want to go to the what I'm calling the Easter egg colors? You want to have those experiences. You want to really work on communication. You want to really work on expansion. You want an intense experience that may not be there in Australia. You may find it dull when you're wanting and confining, lack of
I see
freedom is something my soul craves. You're not going to find it there, because it's so Rahu and Venus, and it doesn't have, it's like other than those, it's like a quiet place.
Yeah. I can see more of a model like you have, where I would have a base somewhere but move in and out according to different times of the year. Like maybe Yeah, for specific needs. I don't want to grow old to be one of these people who is so stuck in the sea of calmness that they become bored and they don't go outside of their comfort zone. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to be like an old person in a retirement home who goes, what shall I do today? And that's what I'm afraid of.
And that's the problem with Brisbane is that you're so holding on to that security of Rahu and integrity that in other ways, and that may be fine. You're as a single mom with young kids. I've got grown kids. I understand. So that isn't your time. But I think you're right. Is that when you get older and you get have the freedom to travel, then I think you're going to want to go to these other places and scratch the other itches you have, whatever they are.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. That's been very enlightening.
So that is there's a couple of other things we're going to do before we close this. And before I get to those, so I want to ask, is there anything else about the natal chart or any other aspects of the astrocartography and the lines and any other places you want to look? I'm going to put it up big again. So if there's any other questions you have about anything, any other place or anything else, this is the time before we move on and move to the closing.
No, I don't think so. I think you've captured my interest in exactly what we've talked about. I think we've confirmed the intuition, and I'm the kind of person that could sit down and ask questions till the cows come home with a spreadsheet about every single location and why. But I think I've got out of it what I wanted to get out of it. Do you know what I mean?
And so
I've got the main gist.
Okay, so again, we're doing a reading on a podcast, so I'm going to do it as a real reading on the podcast. And so I would then say to you, then, if you have any questions at any point later on, you could always write me as they come up as you start working in this, as particularly when you're looking 5 years down the road. But yeah, so we can get more specific, but the information won't change. You got to decide which color you want, which what are you trying to grow, and then we can figure out a place to grow there, because they're very different. The planets are slightly different because they work on different parts of us, and then the aspects of first, fourth, seventh, and 10th house energize different aspects, and so that's so that we take those into account in order to find a place or places for you for a particular aspect. And so how long, you might ask, how long should I be there? You might get in 2 weeks, you might get enough. If you're a quickie, you might go there for 2 weeks and it might be enough for you. And it might be that you need to live there for 3 months or 6 months in order to really get all of it for you. I wouldn't go there to write a book for 2 weeks and then go back home. I'd stay there and finish it there.
Yeah,
the energy there.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I thought it was very interesting that when you combine it with, I don't know what you called it, but in the other original big chart, the different periods in your life that you go through, that the different energies are going to work for you in different periods of time. And so therefore, it's wise to reevaluate what you want when you're coming into and out of each of these major periods of your life, the Saturn and the
okay. So what I didn't show you, but I'm gonna do this now. I need to, okay. How do I get this bar off? Okay, here we go. So let me show you something interesting. So this is your natal chart, and let's put you in Europe. Let's put you in London. Let's look at your chart, your relocation chart in London, okay? So this has now changed. And because your planets are so wide, I don't think it's going to change very much, because so this is London. You still have 2 planets in the Kendra or cardinal houses. You've got Mars in the 4th house and Moon in the 7th house. Your Rahu Venus moves to the 9th house. That's it moves from from your grounding, and now it moves to your passion. Your sun and your moon become your 11th house instead of your Mars. Your wisdom goes from 10th house to 3rd house. Your Jupiter moves into 2nd house, expansion in terms of basic needs. Your Saturn moves into all your organization goes to your outer work. That's really nice. That's not in your 1st house. That's your personality, but it goes into how you deal with the outer world. And moon in the 7th house, so that all of your emotions go with other people. When you're old enough for that, I wouldn't say 20 years old is a great 7th house, but as you get older and you want to have compassion with the world, it's beautiful. And Mars in the 4th house, I'd call this as a 5. I put charts, 5 is the best and 1 is the weakest when I do relocation. And this looks like to me a 5. This is perfect. Okay, it doesn't have 1st house and it doesn't have 10th house. It doesn't have career, but I still call it, all the positions are really strong. This is London. So this is a relocation. And so everything has got a different look, but it's very positive for you and for what you want. And it's a wonderful expression of you. And I go to India, I'm a different, not so much different anymore, but there's a freedom there. I like to say in Rishikesh that it's like the parents are gone all weekend, all the time. That's how free it is that there's no barriers and everybody comes and goes, wow, this is such a free place. And I think London was like that for you. Is London like that for most people? No. But for you, with this relocation chart, you went a little bit into the dirtiness and the tubes are dirty and all of that. But basically, you're living in a whole new perspective that's very freeing and doesn't have any of the limitations that you feel in. You still got so your doing is your grounding, 4th house. And that's nice. That goes from 11th house to 4th house, that your grounding is in your doing. So as long as you stay busy, then you feel grounded. So this is a relocation chart, is beautiful. And this would be the same for Spain underneath it.
Okay. And can you do me one favor? Sorry. Can you just for fun put in Anchorage?
Same thing, Anchorage. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. And again, you have 2 planets. You have the planets, you have the 1st and the 10th house empty again somehow, and the 4th you have the 4th. So you have for the 4th, you have Sun and Mercury in the 4th. So the grounding is in your own self. So it's a little bit more inward. It's not so outward. Okay. The communication, you can commute when you're grounded in yourself, then you can communicate. You've got Venus, Rahu in your 2nd house. That's a little irritating. There's your integrity as basic necessities. That's a little bit irritating. That got to be around basic necessities. It's gonna be a little, and then you've got your moon in your 12th house. So your ethereal is your emotional. It's a deeper chart, but those are not such settled positions. Your Saturn moves into 11. That's okay. Your Mars in your 9th is good. Your Ketu is in the 8th house of transformation. I don't think we've talked about 8th house. So you get your 8th house there. Maybe one of the others we did, but you have 8th house energy. Your Jupiter is in your 7th house. So expansion. I might call this a 4, maybe a 3.5. It's good, but not as good as the other one, but it's good. And it's got that moon, Venus, Rahu, and that's not the easiest position. And what happens is I call this a Jiminy Cricket. And that's because your 1st house is empty. And so moon is on one shoulder and Venus and Rahu is on the other. And when we get triggered, then the moon, Jiminy Cricket, you're too emotional. You're not sensitive. You're too emotional. And the Venus says they need to be in integrity. Don't hang with them. They're bad influences. Geppetto said we need to be home at 10 o'clock. We're not in integrity. And so you're going to have this, you understand what I'm saying? You get this little voices in your head that appear out of nowhere. And that could be a difficult position. That would be the nature up there. You get to be 50 years old. Maybe it's something you're ready to deal with. It's just the nature of it. That's why I'd call it a 3.5 of a 4, not a 5. Still some really strong positions in this.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
And so I want to make sure
contrast
everybody
that.
understands we can do this for anywhere. There are 12 different charts, and if we move to a different location in Alaska, the degree of the rising sign would change. So if we move to Juneau, it probably would be the same chart, but it might be 9 degrees, or maybe it's 24 degrees rising. And that to me isn't really much different. And so it becomes, when you get to the edge, it's like about a 2,000-mile spread. Then you get to the next one, you move over east or west, and then you get to the next one, and then everybody clicks left or right, depending on whether you go east or west. And so I think, and I was reading a post just before I was relaxing before we got together, where another astrologer, she said she'd been professional astrologer. She agreed with me that the relocation chart is more important than the lines. I want the relocation energy to be strong, and then I want the good lines. I might go to the lines and I would accept the relocation the way it is, but the relocation chart is more the overall bob of the energy of the place.
Okay.
I like the climate, I like the people, it's not too expensive, it's clean, those kinds of things. And then, do I want to be in the city? Do I want to be on the outskirts? Do I want to be at the beach or near the beach or in the mountains? That's the lines that you specify. Once I have a good relocation chart, then I look for the lines to find. And I can start with the lines and then look at the relocation and make sure that it's okay. But if the relocation isn't very good, I'm really clear to tell people that that line is at a cost. There may be another way to get that line in a different place where you have a different relocation chart.
Yeah, very
Maybe
interesting.
go north or south.
Yeah. Good point there. Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, so that's how relocation works.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so now I want to work towards the closing, and I want to give you this. It didn't really come up, but this is a reading. I want to give it to you and the people out there. So I like to say at the end of the reading, people say, I'm now back in the PowerPoint slide that I sent you. I like to say at the end, people say, this is great information, Indra. Now, what do I do with it? Okay, so then I was given the 4 doorways to conscious living. So the first one is learning to observe. So I want you to start observing your own thinking and your own behavior, and I want you to start observing your reaction to other people's thinking and behavior. That I want you to get out of the movie of your life into the audience, to watch your life from a disconnect, not a disconnected, but with discernment, in order to observe what's going on, but not from the middle of it, from the outside of it. Then the second doorway is to let go and release what doesn't serve you. So letting go involves being aware of a feeling, letting it come up, staying with it, and letting it run its course without wanting to make it different or do anything about it. It means simply to let the feeling be there and to focus on on letting out the energy behind it. And when letting go, ignore all thoughts. And this is from the book Letting Go by David Hawkins, who's he's passed on, but he was a deep enlightened man. Power and force, the map of consciousness, the numbers, if you're familiar with that. This is a wonderful book to hang with if the people feel that letting go is a particular issue. Then the third doorway, you will love yourself. And then fourth, you will live in the moment. If you live in the moment and you love yourself, it's the same. How do I love myself? You let go and release what doesn't serve you, understanding that some things that you don't like may serve you right now, and that's okay. Then stay with them because they serve you. But if it doesn't serve you, then let it go. How do I know what to let go and release? You learn to observe. Those are the 4 doorways to conscious living. Anything about that?
I would have to say I am still a work in progress when it comes to not trying to fix in the letting go process. I am aware, I observe that's happening, I let it rise, and it rises, and then I'm like, how do I fix it? I'm always solution oriented. I'm feeling this, why am I feeling that? And I analyze it, and then I like put a healing on it. And yes, so I'll probably need to go with that.
You're saying it doesn't really disappear?
It's just that the knowing, yeah, it doesn't. I spend too much time analyzing why I'm going through that experience, that emotion.
I think you're back to your Saturn friend.
Yeah.
Interestingly, now I'm quite a bit older, and I don't expect anybody to be anywhere near this, but in the last 5 years, maybe longer, maybe 10 years, the whole why has completely disappeared. Do not care why about anything. Does not matter. I feel it. That's all that matters. Why? I don't care. Why is the world the way that it is? Why is there war? Why is my this way? Why haven't I finished the book? Why do I need to do this? Why is it hard? Does not matter. It only matters that it is. It does not matter why. But I'm not saying that I had that at 50, and I certainly didn't have it at 60. But in the last 5 or 10 years, Saturn has just kicked why down the curb and does not matter at all.
That must be very peaceful. Does that bring you a different sense of peace about yourself?
Absolutely. It brings total peace. And impermanence is the same way, that things change. And so I don't have the responsibility to change things. I'm not saying that I'm free. I'm not saying I don't work on myself. I have to work on myself. I got to put in 100% of my effort, but I'm not there. There is a greater power that's in charge of everything. And I don't have to be in charge of anything. That it just happens, and I get given what I need. And if I have a challenge with it, then I just observe it and thank it and have gratitude for it. The old satsang question: what if I only had 9 fingers? You'd have gratitude that you had 9 fingers. But what if I had 8? Then you'd have gratitude for 8. And if you had 5, you'd have gratitude for the 5 you had.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Very interesting. Yeah. I would have to say where I've got to in my life and what I do as a career is 100% because I ask and obsess with the answer to why. And I agree, it doesn't bring peace. It's fascinating, but it brings up more mud than it does calmness. Do you know what I mean? Woo! It's like living in the fire.
Yes.
So that's interesting.
So I bring that up, and I'm not saying everybody's ready for that. Again, 50 plus years, and it's a miracle that I got this far. But the thing is that the why completely disappears, and when the why disappears, then the need to be in control disappears, and the need to try to understand disappears, and the need to be first or best, it all disappears. And then that's where the peace comes in. That's freedom isn't being able to do what you want. Freedom is not having to do what you want. That's freedom. And I've talked about this on a lot of podcasts, that it's a middle step, because I talk with people who've gotten to the second step. They realize that they can take quote unquote control of their lives. It's the 30-year-olds. They can take control of their life. But the next step is that there is no control, and I don't need to do what I need to do, that I can be just as happy having it or not having it.
Yeah.
That's freedom.
Yeah. Okay. Look forward to that.
Okay. So you got the 4 doorways. Then I'm gonna stop sharing. Go to big. So I'm gonna see you. We can see each other big. So what I like to do here. So at this point, at the end of the reading, I would tell you that if you have friends, so do you have the reading? I have other readings I do. I'll put in a little commercial here if that's okay. I do the location readings. I do my main reading is a life reading. I take you through the Enneagram of personality. Then I take you through to learn your core triggers. There are 9 personality types. One of them is at our core, and it's the core triggers we learn from. It's incredibly freeing to understand that. Then I take them through strengths and weaknesses of the natal chart. And then I take them through in the life reading, the wheel of totality. It's the blank spots. It's the places. It's the empty houses. Nobody talks about the empty houses, but each house contains awareness. And you don't work on it until your age, until about 50, because in 20s and 30s, you're not interested in your deficiencies. You're mostly building up ego. And so the blind spots, the wheel of totality, it gives us the ability to understand what it is that we don't understand, what's in the empty houses.
Okay, fascinating.
Okay, and then I also I do relationship readings, I do family dynamic readings, I do spiritual progress reading with the wheel of totality, and the Navamsha reading, which is again an astrology reading. It's the crown jewel of readings. It's who you become, mostly at 60, but in your age, you're already starting to, when you imagine what I want to do later on, the quiet place when the kids are gone, that's the Navamsha reading. So I do that. So if there's any friends or family or anybody listening there, you contact me through the email or the website. So then the last thing I do is a tarot card reading. And the way we do this is, and what happens with the tarot card is that it takes 2 and 3 hour readings, and it takes it down to 8 words. And so the way we do this is you ask a question, and I don't have to know what the question is. Okay. And if you have more than one question, then we do more than one card.
Am I supposed to say the question out loud, or
No, you can say the question. I don't really care. You can keep it to yourself, or you can say it. What I say to people is that if you tell me the question afterwards, I can help you understand the answer. But I don't need to know. Okay.
Okay.
So you have the question. Let's see if we can get this in. So the way this works is that I'm going to shuffle the cards. I want you to put your question and your energy into the cards as I shuffle them.
Okay.
Now I'm going to shuffle them. And I want to tell people out there, and you too, that I happen to use the Crowley deck. And I use this book called, the readings are called Mirror of the Soul. These are incredible. Tarot, Mirror of the Soul. Very deep, very spiritual. I found these to be incredible. And I will send you the reading. I'm gonna read a little bit of it, but I'm gonna send it to you also so that you can get it, so that you can read it all at your leisure. And that's what I do for people in the readings. So I wait till I feel just the intuition that the cards are set and the right card. And so I've got Princess of Swords. See if you can see that. Princess of Swords. So you need to cut away something here. The earthy aspect of air. Out of the clouds into clarity, victory over moods, rebellion. The Princess of Swords represents a fresh intellectual clarity which shakes everything up. She has just demolished the old altar, which explodes, sending clouds of smoke, rubble, and ash into the air. When intellectual and spiritual air renewal meet the element earth, the altars of old ideals are destroyed, and the smoke will soon settle, leaving room for clarity. Getting rid of your old ideals. Every change, every inner conflict you experience says smoke and ash, emotions and moods flying into the air. But the Princess of Swords does not allow the dust caused by the destruction of the old and useless to cloud the clarity of her vision. We were talking about this a little bit. She uses her sword to sweep away moods and disruptive thoughts which arise. She is resolute and aggressive, dealing with the practical issues, particularly when they include contradictory or paradoxical elements. I'll read you the whole thing. It's not that long. The Princess of Swords represents an extremely rebellious person who is not to be intimidated either by the established or sanctified. Because she rebels in the name of clarity, openness, and truth, This is Saturn, Venus. See what I'm telling you? It takes it down to 8 words. She prepares to destroy anything repressive, anything which prevents a full experience life, including her moral codes. Her no to repress is rooted in deep yes to herself and existence. We can compare her actions to Jesus throwing the moneylenders out of the temple. That's the Rahu energy. Indications. Okay, your thoughts and visions may at times destroy holy altars. That's bull in the china shop. Don't let yourself be buried by the flying debris. Don't allow your moods to take hold of you. Remain true to your real ideals. Questions. What old altars are present in your surroundings in your life? Have you the courage to destroy them? So do you want to talk about that? We've talked about those, but do you want to add anything?
It was just very interesting. I'll tell you what my question was.
I have 2 more, but if you...
Oh, you got 2 more? Oh, no, that's fine. No, do the other cards first.
Okay, let me finish. So the question. So the suggestion is look inside and see if your rebellion is rooted in love. That's a great question or suggestion. And then the affirmation. This is where it takes it down to 8 words. You've got 7 words. My rebellion is positive, constructive, and creative. Look inside, see if your rebellion is rooted in love. I think that's a great suggestion. And then the affirmation. My rebellion is positive, constructive, and creative. Please.
Okay.
So is there anything you want to say about that? You want to share or?
I would have to say, and I know that it's not your specialty, but I'll just make a generalized sweeping statement that rebellion has been the theme of not only this lifetime, but every other lifetime that I've discovered. And whether these rebellions have been constructive or destructive. So that is right on time. It's about, understanding why the rebellion is still this big urge and to really take that within.
So if that's the case, then being on that Rahu line isn't so good for you. That it gives you a sense of peace because it's comfortable, but it's always confrontive in terms of it's like going to the bar and being macho. It's like, don't go to the bar. Maybe that you'll let go of the macho-ness.
Yeah, okay.
So I think that the pastel lines, the Easter eggs, are better for you because they take you out of that rebellion. That while it's grounding for you, and that grounding is more important, and you obviously can't, I'm not saying you leave right now, but the reality of it is that it takes care of certain of your needs and it's helpful for you at a certain part of your life. But I don't think later on it's so good for you that if you're talking about lifetime after lifetime, I'd get away from that Rahu line.
Yeah, it is. It's a theme. It is. Yeah.
Okay.
It's what I do as a career, so I know exactly that it's the theme of every single incarnation that I have done.
Okay. So you want to do another card, or is that good? Do you have another question?
I feel that kind of just sums up everything neatly, unless you feel called to it.
No, I don't. And isn't that amazing? That's why I do the tarot card at the end. Somehow it pulls it all together out of it. Whatever your question was, it might have answered. Did it answer it? Did it answer it directly or indirectly?
My question was, and I literally said to myself that I feel like I'm splitting myself in half, which is funny with the sword. And it has also been the theme of all of the incarnations as well, is this feel that I can only have either or, and the answer is either relationship or career and personal development. Each incarnation that I've had is a saga on one or the other. And I feel like this lifetime I've been like, oh,
Yeah.
pulling myself apart, trying to resolve all the things that hold me back in romance and trying to resolve everything that's held me back in career and tearing myself apart in the process with whether good or bad, but really saying, am I tearing myself apart from the perspective of love? What would love do? I think is, it's that, I need to stop slicing myself up into a million pieces.
Yeah, so beautiful. And thank you for being vulnerable here and on the podcast. And my response to that is it's an awful lot of thinking. I would let go of the thinking. I would just be more living in my gut. I don't make any decision with my head. I make them all with my gut. What do I feel? What am I going to eat tonight? I eat the same thing every night, but still, what do I feel like eating rather than what's in my head? I don't take it at all to my head. My head is good. It's a GPS and running errands. But other than that, I'm not interested in figuring out in my head. I'm all into going to the gut. And in the gut, then all of these, I'm not good enough and am I doing the right thing? Oh, they all disappear. And again, 50 years, more than 50 years doing this. But that's my suggestion. You got into an awful lot of head right there.
Yeah, I'm like 99.9% of the time in my head, so I understand that. Yeah.
Okay. So that is the reading.
Thank you very much. That was fascinating. Very interesting. I learned a lot. Thank you. And I will not have to do anything. I nearly said I'll have to go back and watch that many times. It's a really ingrained tendency.
So
I shall just sit with that.
I'm getting another intuition and that I want to give you. And that is that one thing we didn't talk about is your empty seventh house, wheel of totality. Empty seventh house, seeing through conditioning. You don't see through conditioning. And I have a feeling that some of what you're talking about is all family and society. You're trying to live to their expectations. And I know you talked about the family with not doing what you're doing, but even though you're not doing what they would do and they don't understand it, you're still, it's the old, I'm a lawyer because my dad wanted me to be a lawyer because he wanted to be a lawyer, but he didn't be a lawyer. Okay. So when you have an empty seventh house natally, that you're susceptible to conditioning. And so I think that you're shadow boxing because they're not really your issues. They're their issues. Your issue is that you're believing it, but it's not your issue. And so it's shadow boxing because it's not, you're trying to find a place to heal within you, and there's nothing to heal because it's not actually your issue. What your issue is believing stuff that other people want you to do and how you want you to be, that you buy into the conditioning of the good girl being the good girl when you don't want to be the good girl. But when you be the bad girl, then you got the Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder saying you went bad girl again. And there should be the gut saying, hey, I'm just a girl. Where bad or good, I don't know what that is. I'm just doing what I feel. You understand?
Yeah. Yep. Yep, you got it right on the head there.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So I think that's what's going on. I think you need to let go of that. And again, you're coming into 50 and you'll be able to do that. But you understand you're shadow boxing with these issues that aren't really your issues. And that's why they'll never heal.
Yep. You can't.
You just have to release them.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, release. Okay. All right, my friend. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. And I will put all the details to contact Indra in the show notes. and you're on YouTube and Facebook and all the other socials that I'm not on, so they can look you up, and I'll tag you in the posts on Facebook because that's really the only social media that I do. But thank you for your time. I really appreciate that. That's been very interesting, and very interesting to also be able to see those lines and the relocation chart, to be able to say that's how the lines work, and then this is how relocation works. Yeah, that's it's given me a good sense of, I don't know, made me feel a bit calmer about it all.
Yes, beautiful.
Calmer, but it felt calmer.
No, it's calmer, because what I like to say to people is, in India, I tell them that it's clear. I like to say it's really clear until you get over the threshold of my room. Once you leave, within the energy, it's really clear and very clear. And as soon as you leave that energy, then you dip, and then that calmness will disappear. And the work is to get back to that calmness on your own. That with the reading, then you get to a place of clarity, and everything disappears. But then when you get back on your own energy, when it sinks, if that's the direction it goes, when you get back to your own energy, then that clarity disappears, and then the calmness leaves. And so the idea is to get back to your own energy. Yes, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, beautiful to be together and share.
Yep, thank you. Okay. All right. So that was mammoth. That was great. Thank you very much.